KSDO.
It's 72 degrees at Lindbergh Field. The Michael Reagan Show is next after World and National News from ABC.
Expressed in this program are not necessarily those of KSDO or its sponsors.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Reagan here. It is 1:06, 6 minutes after 1 here at AM 1130 KSDO. I'm with you every day, 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock, Monday through Friday, here on AM 1130 in San Diego. We're going to have plenty of time as we get to open phones a little bit later, around 2 o'clock today. But let me tell you, we have a guest. You might have heard the news going around the country about a gentleman out of Paris, Texas. His name is Ricky Don White. For many years, we have all wondered what really happened in Dallas, Texas, November 1963 to John F. Kennedy. All of us remember probably where we were on that date in history. And we've all wondered, was it done by one man, Lee Harvey Oswald, or was it done by other than one man? Wonder if it was done by the CIA. Well, Ricky Don White says his father, acting on orders from the CIA, fired the shots that killed former President John F. Kennedy. He's on the show today, also joined by Robert Groden, author of High Treason and staff photographic consultant for the House Assassination Committee in Washington. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, is that you, Robert?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Ricky, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, Ricky, why don't we start with you? This really is shocking the nation right now with the information that you're coming out with. Tell us how you found out how you got the information that made you feel your father killed John F. Kennedy.
Well, it was a scripture in the diary in 1985 that I came across that it stated that my father was involved in the Kennedy assassination and his involvement.
How did you find this diary? How were you made known there was one?
It was in 1982 when my grandfather had passed away in Paris, Texas, that I had found a footlocker after returning from the funeral, and found a footlocker that was in a storage room outside the house. And at that time, the footlocker was too big to put into my 81 Trans Am, so I went and bought a suitcase and had gathered as much material out of this footlocker containing a diary, his original military orders, a couple of film cartridges, which one was a military man and one was maneuvers in the Philippines. And at this also, I had found memorabilia that he had kept dealing with the Kennedy assassination. And at first, my thought was strictly his strange death that happened in 1971 gave me the motivation to be able to research my father and his previous past.
What was the strange death you're talking about? What happened that made it strange to you?
Well, in 1981, what really made strange to me before I ever investigated it was the fact of a gentleman named Don Rasmussen that embezzled a $200,000 life insurance policy just several months after the fact of my father's death. And he went in there with another attorney. I can't remember his name offhand, but him and Don Rasmussen was in that room, and there's a gentleman that was in the fire with him named Dick Adair. Stated that he could never remember him signing this paper, but they came out with a form showing that he had power of attorney of this $200,000 life insurance that my father had on himself.
All right, you talked about 1982 when you found the footlocker, the military footlocker, but didn't someone back, as far back as 1978, a longtime family friend, discuss this with you before?
That's correct. It was 1978. I was at a Kroger's parking lot. We had lived out in Powerley at the time, and I had moved just shortly, and he was out there looking for me and came upon me at a Kroger's parking lot, and he was really shook up because at the time he had already been shot about twice in the abdomen, and they had tried to kill him in his house. And he needed to talk to me really bad in 1978 because he was for sure the House Select Committee was aware of my father's involvement and that he wanted to tell me before anybody else, and regrets ever telling me that in 1978 since the House Select Committee never did reveal his name.
What was your feeling when the man told you about your father?
Oh, I denied it. There's no possible way that this man that I loved and treasured and still do admire, because he is my father, couldn't believe it. There's just no way. I went to work that night real hurt inside, and even though the House Select Committee had been at the House, none of this ever started adding up. 2 and 2 never started adding up. And I rejected him. Matter of fact, I never saw him for at least, it was 10 years before I knocked on his door again. It was in 88 when I went and found him and met with him again. And then I told him that I apologized for being gone so long. And knowing that I knew then what I know now, but I didn't believe you then. But it's hard to tell you now. I do believe you.
All right, we're going to take a break. More with my guest, Ricky Don White, who says his father, acting on orders from the CIA, fired the shots that killed President John F. Kennedy. And also with Robert Groden, author of High Treason and staff photographic consultant for the House Assassination Committee in Washington, D.C. If you'd like to get in and ask these gentlemen any questions, our number, San Diego Metro, 560-1130, North County Coast, 436-1130, North County Inland, 745-1130, and South Bay East County, 669-1130. I'm Mike Reagan. It's 11 minutes after 1 here at AM 1130 KSDO. News from the world of real estate. Here, nationally acclaimed real estate consultant Sanford Goodkin every Thursday and Friday at 6:55 a.m. and 4:25 p.m. exclusively on San Diego's new station, AM 1130 KSDO. It's 14 minutes after 1 here at AM 1130. Mike Reagan with you. We're visiting with Ricky Don White, who says his father, acting on orders from the CIA, fired the shots that killed former President John F. Kennedy, and Robert Groden, author of High Treason and staff photographic consultant for the House Assassination Committee in Washington. Let me go to you, Mr. Groden, next, all right?
Sure.
When did you get this information, and what do you think of what Ricky Don White is saying?
I was invited in to examine this information by the JFK Assassination Information Center here in Dallas 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And I have been looking at it from every possible angle that I can come up with, and I have not been able to find a single hole in any of it. It all matches. There's nothing inconsistent with what we knew. It fills in some of the blanks that we didn't know before.
What kind of blanks?
Well, for instance, of course, the names, it verifies positions that we had always assumed based on the on trajectories and evidence that existed before. This just simply ties it in that much closer. And a lot of what was in the diary was not known and proven until about 8 years after Ricky's father passed away.
Now, let me talk to both of you on this, and maybe you first, Ricky, on this. Robert Groden makes reference to the diary. Of course, this diary that we're talking about is now missing as you go public with this story. What do you say to people that are skeptical at that point because it is missing?
Well, all I can say is it's my fault, and my family holds me responsible for the missing of the diary. But I can say nothing but, that it was my fault and ignorancy of my part that I did not make any copies of the diary. And then the fact that I got them down, they let me get to my lowest peak and when they took the diary.
This is you're talking about when you met with the FBI.
That's correct.
You showed them the diary and just you never got it back.
Well, no, sir, that's not true. I showed them the diary, and they had told me that my father had a large imagination and sent the diary back. And we loaded it after they had finished copying everything that day and made a copy of the safety deposit box key. They loaded everything back in the box and followed me downstairs where I put it in my trunk and went home with the material. And at that time, it was sitting in there on the pool table where I'd gathered it at. And was in my room crying. They upset me very much because of the fact that I went to them to tell them the story after Al Shorey had called them. And after a little while, I knew that there was no way that they were believing me and that they were calling me a nut. And then when I got home, it had upset me so bad. My wife, Tricia, was in the room with me, and the doorbell had rang. And she went to the door, and it was Tom Ferris of the FBI had told her that he thought he had left a notebook or some writing tablet in the box itself. She had come in there in the bedroom and told me that he was in there getting that, and I told her that it was gone.
There's some real connections between the things that you found in that footlocker and also what was used in the assassination attempt. And I'm sure, Robert Groden, these are things that were interesting to you because also in there was a Mauser rifle of the same make that Lee Harvey Oswald has. Is that correct?
The rifle was not the same as Lee Harvey Oswald. It was the same as the rifle that was originally described in the Warren Report as being found.
All right.
The original Dallas police records are that a 7.65 Mauser was the weapon that was recovered in the depository. It is a far better, far more reliable weapon than the Mannlicher Carcano that was alleged to be used by Oswald, which, by the way, was a slightly different caliber, 6.5. I wanted to comment, if I may, for just one moment on the and the FBI sending Ricky home with that with the diary. Had they kept it at that time, they would have had to give him a receipt for it. There would be something that they would have to be responsible for and deal with. By coming after the fact and taking it without an official receipt, they have what you call deniability. And they can always claim that they don't have it, but I tend to believe every word that Rick is saying about that.
Do you believe Ricky Don White's life is in danger?
I think it was in far more danger before this information came out. Now the insurance policy is the fact that the entire country wants answers about this. We have a very valid question that Rick has raised here, and this is a legacy that he is trying to push forward. It's his belief, as I understand it, that his father was indeed very sorry for what he had done. It was not his personal choice to do it, and that he was remorseful about it, and that he wanted the story told. And I think that's why Ricky has come out and done this. I think it's very commendable.
Yeah, Robert, have you had a chance to look at I'm sure you have, at the cables that were also in the locker? Those are the ones that, Bobby Inman, former Naval Intelligence Director and CIA Deputy Director, feels are a forgery, but yet they are backed up by another gentleman. Who's that?
What Bobby Inman is saying, by the way, is very, very funny. What he's saying is that they don't look like official documents to him. Well, CIA stationery, CIA headings that you would normally find on interoffice memos and formal memorandum does not apply here. This is not something that's supposed to be published or put in any particular file. I think it's ludicrous for him to say that these don't look official to him. They wouldn't. This has nothing to do with anything he's dealing with. And we're not talking about possibly CIA memos, although maybe we are. We're talking about something that has a lead heading, naval intelligence. These appear to me to be cryptographic messages that are supposed to be viewed once. They're decoded upon receipt. They are dealt with and destroyed. At the bottom of each of the 3 pages, it does say destroy. And by the way, although only 3 of these memos survive and were kept in this, what I'm referring to as a time capsule, which is what it was of sorts, there may have been more. These 3 are the ones that 2 before and 1 after the assassination really tell the story. There may have been more that we're not even aware of.
These were authenticated by Admiral Stockdale?
Stockwell, John Stockwell,
okay.
Who was with the Central Intelligence Agency. He says there is nothing inconsistent between the wording and the form that is used here in official government memorandum.
Let me read one of these before we take a break and come back with you. This is to remarks to Mandarin, which Ricky Don White says was a code name, CIA code name for his father. And this is in 1963. Foreign affairs assignments have been canceled. The next assignment is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. Destination will be Houston, Austin, or Dallas. Contacts are being arranged now. Orders are subject to change at any time. Reply back if not understood. Signed C. Bowers, I believe it is. OSHA. And then at the end it says code AAA destroy. When we come back, more with my guests, Ricky Don White and Robert Groden. It's 22 minutes after 1. I'm Mike Reagan, and this is AM 1130 KSDO. Back, everybody. 24 minutes after 1. Michael Reagan with you, visiting with Ricky Don White and with Robert Groden. If you'd like to call in, ask any questions of my guests, San Diego Metro, 560-1130, North County Coast, 436-1130, North County Inland, 745-1130, South Bay, East County, 669-1130. September 1963, Navy Intelligence, remarks, Mandarin, Code A. Dallas destination chosen. Your place hidden within the department. Contacts are within this letter. Continue on as planned. And then code AAA again, destroy. On. Signed again by C. Bowers. Who is C. Bowers?
We don't seem to know. It could be somebody's code name. It could be somebody else. It could be a cover. I personally don't know. I don't know if there was any reference in the diary. Ricky, was there?
No, there's not. C. Bowers was just a surprise to me as it was to y'all, because I've never heard that name ever before.
Ricky, let's go back to you because there's more connections other than just the Mauser and these documents that I'm reading one by one. But there's also a connection between your father, whose name was Rossi or Roscoe? Roscoe Anthony White.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there was also a connection between him and Lee Harvey Oswald. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was it?
It was in the Philippines. They had left on the USS Bexar at the same time and rendezvous at Subic Point, Subic Bay, which is a CIA operative at the time that was flying U-2 flights, secret flights over Russia.
And is there a picture that was taken of the two of them?
That's correct.
And
Time magazine showed it in the November issue of 1988. And my father was single back in the background.
So they did know each other. Also, Geneva White, who was his wife, I believe that she worked for Jack Ruby.
That's correct. In September of 1963, worked for Jack Ruby for 3 weeks at the Carousel Club.
While she was at the Carousel Club, was she ever able to overhear conversations? Did your father ever visit the club?
That's correct. There was one conversation that was overheard in September of 1963 with my father and Jack Ruby in the same room conspiring on the Kennedy assassination.
What did she think? I mean, she had to just absolutely go...
Others had to overcome 4 shock treatments in her lifetime. It's basically because of what she had overheard in 2 conversations.
So she has known this information since the very, very beginning.
That's correct.
And has to live with it every day.
That's correct. That's the reason why it's a burden on her, and her health is very, very bad.
Why do you think it took so long for it, if she had the information from the beginning, and questions have always come up about the grassy knoll, which we'll also get into, why do you think she was able, why did she keep it buried so long? Why didn't she come public before?
It was when I confronted her in 1985 with the diary and showed her, and then she knew that I knew the truth. It was at that time she realized that we needed to come forward and tell the truth.
All right, let's take a couple of calls. Brian, you're on a car phone. Go.
Yeah, I've been reading this book, Best Evidence. Is the guest familiar with that book?
Yes, we're familiar with it.
And I just happened to start reading it about 3 weeks ago, and I was right in the 3rd chapter, I believe, when I saw your the story on CNN that you're talking about. And my question is, in the first chapters of the book, they go into great detail about all the witnesses right in the vicinity of the headshot running up the grassy knoll up to the fence. And they report seeing a policeman on the other side of the fence, and the way the book reads, and this is before your story broke, everyone assumes that this policeman is just someone, that's looking for a gunman. And my question is, what was his exact position, and what did he do with the rifle or his gun?
Ricky, do you want to take that?
You bet. My father was standing behind the stockade fence, which would be behind the large tree, behind the fence. There was another gentleman that was standing to the right of him, evidently, because after the shots were fired, he had handed the rifle to another man and had hurled over the fence to be able to obtain this film. This military man was taking the motorcade as he was coming across, and he hurled back around the fence where he met up with the gentleman that had broke the gun down, and he had time to blend into the cars or the parking lot to where he had crossed over railroad tracks and down an embankment into a car.
Brian, do you have any other questions?
That's interesting because in the detail in the book, they mentioned there were 2 people with their feet up on a bumper just on the other side of the fence before the shooting. They have witnesses to that effect. That's all I had.
Okay.
Well, Brian, thank you for the call. So what you're saying there, your father was working with another man on the grassy knoll.
That's correct. He was standing to the right of him. I don't know how far back that he was or where he was positioned. I just know that my father was behind the large tree to the right of the knoll.
May I add something here, Mike?
Go ahead.
As working for the House Assassinations Committee, I can confirm that they did indeed find, through the acoustics evidence and photographic evidence, that the man who fired the shot from the grassy knoll was standing 8 feet to the west, or as we view it in some photographs, to the left of the edge of the corner of the stockade fence. The people who made that discovery through acoustics evidence had not been aware that the photographs existed. It confirms exactly what Ricky's father wrote in the diary.
All right, can you both stay with us because we got some people who want to ask you some questions, and there's a lot more to talk about. Can you do that?
Sure.
Okay, we were visiting with Ricky Don White. Of course, he says his father, acting on orders from the CIA, fired the shots that killed John F. Kennedy. Also, Robert Groden, author of High Treason and staff photographic consultant for the House Assassination Committee in Washington. More with your phone calls when we come back. News, sports, traffic, and weather's next. I'm Mike Reagan, and this is San Diego's news station, AM 1130 KSDO.
Lots of motor oil.
Clean. Everybody, it is 1:36, 24 minutes before 2 o'clock. Michael Reagan with you right up until 3 o'clock, as we are every day, Monday through Friday. We're visiting with Ricky Don White, who says his father, acting on orders from the CIA, fired the shots that killed John F. Kennedy. We're also visiting with Robert Groden, author of High Treason and staff photographic consultant for the House Assassination Committee in Washington. Let me read this to you. December 1963. Remarks Mandarin. Stay within department witnesses, have eyes, ears, and mouth, you blank. due of the mix-up. The men will be in to cover all misleading evidence soon. Stay as planned. Wait for further orders. Again, signed by C. Bauer, and destroy when you get it. Another one of the memos found in the footlocker by Ricky Don White, of course, the son of Roscoe Anthony White. Our number 560-1130, North County Coast 436-1130, North County Inland 745-1130, South Bay East County 669-1130. Ricky, other than of course John F. Kennedy being shot, you also state that your father, not Lee Harvey Oswald, shot and killed the officer Tippit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why? What was their relationship? Did they know each other before?
I believe that they were acquaintances together. I don't know if they were personal friends, but I knew that Jack Ruby knew of him, and my father knew of him, and it was strictly for a favor that he was doing for my father or Jack Ruby to carry Lee Harvey Oswald to Redbird Field.
Now, a favor, I don't understand what you're saying. What do you mean by favor?
Well, a favor is in going to Officer Tippit and asking him would he mind driving this man to Redbird Field where he could fly out of the country, and then when he realized that the president had been shot over his radio and the man that he was supposed to be rendezvousing was the same man that they had already proposed as shooting the President of the United States.
And you're saying Officer Tippit was confronted by two gentlemen that day, Lee Harvey Oswald and your father?
That's correct.
And was shot and killed by your father?
That's correct.
Your father, joined, you said 3 months prior to the assassination, joined the Dallas Police Force?
No, that's incorrect. He joined October the 7th, 1963.
Okay.
6 weeks before the Kennedy assassination.
6 weeks.
Same time that Lee Harvey Oswald gets a job at the 6th floor book depository.
Interesting. Let's take a call. Gary, PB, you're on.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I have two questions, one for each guest. I'll make them quick. Mr. White, was prior to the knowledge that you've just spoken about, did you have any reason to believe that your father was an assassin or maybe a sharpshooter or a top-notch sniper in the military? And to Mr. Groden, I have a copy of the Zapruder film, and just plain common sense, by viewing that headshot, it's obvious to me and to many other friends of mine who shoot guns that headshot came from the front right somewhere due to the backward motion of his head when he gets hit. And I'll hang up and listen to your response.
Gary, thank you.
Would you answer the first one first, Ricky, okay?
Yes, it is correct that my father was a sharpshooter in the Philippines and was an expert marksman in handgun and rifle. But I did not know that growing up as a young man. It was only when I started investigating my father's death that I found this out.
I'd like to point out that Lee Harvey Oswald barely qualified as a marksman in the Marine Corps, which is the lowest acceptable rating, whereas Roscoe White was an expert, which is the highest. To answer or to comment on what the caller said, the Zapruder film had never been allowed to be seen by the American public until 1975. I brought it to the American public on Goodnight America, show hosted by Geraldo Rivera, opposite the Tonight Show way back when. Mm-hmm. And it was the first public showing of the film. And when people saw the film, they saw exactly what your caller just pointed out. When the president is struck in the head, he is thrown violently to the rear and to the left, exactly on axis with a shot from the grassy knoll. According to the official version, Oswald was firing from behind, from the depository. Now, I don't know any serious researcher or critic that believes that Oswald fired a shot, and we haven't felt that in maybe 15 years or more. The point of the matter is that the Warren Commission, in support, its 26 volumes of allegedly supporting evidence and testimony, there are 10 million words. Of those 10 million words, there is not a single reference to the direction of travel of the president when he is struck. They ignored the evidence where Roscoe White said he was firing from. We know as a fact that was the firing point. 80% of the witnesses said that. In High Treason, we published for the first time the autopsy photographs of President Kennedy. The autopsy photographs do not match what the doctors said. All of the doctors, every last one of them, every doctor, every nurse, Mrs. Kennedy, herself, witnesses in the plaza, all said that the rear of the president's head was blasted outward, that it was gone. A massive hole, an exit wound in the rear of the head. This does not match the autopsy photographs, but it does match exactly what Rock would have done, firing from the stockade fence.
Gary, thank you for the call. Let's go to Jim. Jim, you're on KSDO.
Yes. Like some other people, of course, I have most of what's written about the assassination. One thing that stood out in the article that was published in the Union, the two code names were mentioned in the one of the telephone, and that was Mandarin and Saul. And I picked up on Saul being the name that was mentioned in Hugh McDonald's book, Appointment in Dallas. And I was curious if any work had been done to reconcile that or to match that up.
There is a problem with the book Appointment in Dallas that made us reject it. By us, I mean the critical community for years. There's just so many blatant errors of known fact and angles and things that were wrong. We tended to reject it. But given the nature of the cables and the as Ricky has spoken about the diary and the references to Saul, we're beginning to rethink that entire scenario now.
Jim, thank you for the call. Let's go to Marty in Rancho Penasquitos. You're on KSDO.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Michael, earlier in the show, one of the gentlemen mentioned that the purpose of the assassination was because someone, perhaps Mr. Kennedy, was a threat to world peace. I would like to know your guest's estimation of the real cause of the assassination, and secondly, what is being done to bring the conspirators to justice?
I'd like to try to answer that if I may. For years, we have been looking for the motives, the possible motives into the death of President Kennedy. We've come up with quite a few, but the ones that make the most sense relate to both Cuba and Vietnam. The president had, of course, okayed the Bay of Pigs invasion against his better judgment. He was convinced by the CIA and his own advisors it was the thing to do. He was misled. The CIA bungled the operation, and the president had to take the blame. He was angry. He fired the leadership of the CIA, Allen Dulles, who had been the director, who, by the way, in the most inexcusable turn of events, was named one of the 7 Warren Commission members. So one of the strongest enemies of the president got to choose the historical version of what was going to be called the assassination history. But there was a second planned invasion going on. The CIA was training anti-Castro Cuban exiles in Florida, New Orleans, and Guatemala. At the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy made a deal that with Khrushchev that if the Russian warheads were removed from Cuba, we would stop our assassination attempts and our planned invasion. The president attempted to live up to his word. The CIA would not listen to him. There was open warfare between the two. The president said he was going to take the CIA, tear them into 1,000 pieces, scatter their ashes to the wind. They were not going to sit still for this. In addition to this, the president had announced shortly before his death that we would be withdrawing from Vietnam. The CIA and the military wanted that war. He had his scenario. His method to finding world peace was through negotiation and peaceful means. Theirs was just the opposite. Where he wanted to deal with words, they wanted to deal with bullets and bombs. And this brings to mind the wording within the first of the 3 surviving notes. And the first one says that the assignment is to eliminate national security threat to worldwide peace. Obviously, the people that wanted the president removed felt that he was too soft on communism, that his route was not the route that they wanted to take, and that seems to be the reason why. Now, there is nothing, as I understand it, anywhere within the diary, and Ricky can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing in the diary that says that Rock wanted to kill the president or that he had any negative feelings about him. It was an assignment, and that's what he did. Apparently, he felt a great deal of remorse about it. He did not feel good about what had happened, and I feel that there's a great deal of substantiation just in the texture of these notes, in the feeling of the words that backs what we know politically about that time.
All right, we're going to take a break. It's 14 minutes before 2 o'clock. Marty, thank you for the call. First on observatory grounds to raise funds for firefighting equipment. For details, call 742-3447. Mike Reagan, we're back with you. It is 1:50, 10 minutes before 2 o'clock. Ricky, let me ask you this question. I'm sure it's come up before, and it's probably going to come up again. What happens to your story credibility-wise when you come out and say you're looking for a book or a movie contract? Are you indeed looking for this, or is the story first importance to you?
The story is the first most important, and when in the news conference I had said something about a book or movie when somebody had asked me about it, and I referenced that it would be nice to see it in the fact to know the whole truth about the Roscoe Anthony White story in a book or a movie, but nobody has come forward to ask at this time for a book or a movie.
Yeah, just credibility-wise, it just doesn't look good. Do you agree with that, Robert?
Mike, I'd like to comment on that. I'm very glad you brought it up. You know, people keep talking about credibility here and motivation and all. I've been with Ricky for several days. We've spent some time together, and I've spoken with him. Ricky's motive in this is not to get a book or a movie. Ricky's motive here is to get the story out that he feels his father wanted to get out. If there were any attempt to deceive here, or as far as motive goes, he never would have mentioned that. What he said was, and I was at the press conference, and I know what was said, and I know the way it was asked. What he said was that he would like to see a book or a movie to get the story out. That was the purpose of it. He wants the story told. He feels that, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, Ricky, please stop me, but it appears as though his father was being used, and used to do something that he did not want to do, something that was an act that was not a good act, but an evil act. And that he felt that his father's story needed to be told, and his father's story should be told. Okay, very good. Let's go back to the phones. We got Maudella in Santee. You're on KSDO, Maudella.
Yes. Well, first I want to say that my husband and I were involved in Guatemala with the Cuban freedom fighters training to hit the Bay of Pigs to take Cuba away from the communists. And since then, and many years since then, I read a book that said that a fellow by the name of Saul confessed to killing President Kennedy. He said he was over on the grassy knoll, and that what was the guy that's been accused?
Lee Oswald?
Yeah, Oswald was just a patsy. And I didn't have time to look up my records here to give you more information. But anyway, there in Guatemala, one of the government officials that was overseeing that job there to train these Cuban exile flyers to hit the Bay of Pigs stayed in our house. Now, whether he was with the CIA or which department of our government, but he had to give up his hotel room and was complaining to my husband. So he said, well, we've got an extra bedroom. You come and stay at our house. So he stayed at our house while that project was going on.
Right. Well, the book that you were referring to is called Appointment in Dallas, written by Hugh McDonald around 1976 or 75, 73. It was written in 73. And basically, it is the recounting of an alleged meeting between Saul and McDonald where Saul said that he had been one of the Kennedy killers and that he had fired from the Dallas Records building, and part of his job was to shoot Lee Harvey Oswald out of the window. The reason why we've had trouble with it is that all of the existing evidence as we have it now, the paraffin test given to Oswald by the Dallas Police Department the afternoon of the assassination, psychological stress evaluator tests and voice stress analyzer tests, other physical evidence, for instance, Oswald being seen on the second floor a mere 72 seconds after the shooting. All of this thrown together makes us know that Oswald never fired a shot. This is confirmed by Roscoe White's diary. All of the evidence is that he never fired a shot. So anyone who said that Oswald was one of the assassins adds a great lack of credibility to their story. Saul's story said Oswald was one of the shooters, so we never believed it.
All right. Maudella, thank you for the call. Let's go to Jason. You're on KSDO. Jason, go.
Good afternoon. I need to ask your guest a question to clarify something. I've only been listening for about a half hour now, so I may have missed a little bit. My question might have been asked before. I've heard other callers comment that the shot that killed the president most likely came from the front, more specifically the grassy knoll.
That's correct.
I'd like to know how a gunshot from the front could cause the internal matter of the president's head to be sprayed forward. If you've looked at the film of his assassination and slowed it down like I have, I've taken it and slowed
virtually anybody because I've done more work on the Zapruder film than any man alive. I've spent nearly 23 years just examining that one film, and others, of course. But the Zapruder film, as you see it, your observation is correct as to the apparent direction of the explosion.
We've got about 30 seconds.
Okay, it appears to go forward. The reason why is because the sun is coming from the right and from behind as we view it. And it ignites visually. It illuminates that part which we're seeing, which is to the front. It also goes to the rear and the left, which you can see in the Nix film taken from the other side of the street.
All right, thank you for the call, Jason. I tell you, what a day. I tell you, it's interesting what's going to go on. I wish you two would both keep me up to date with what is going on because I'd like to just see how it's going to all roll out in the long run. Would you both do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, and if you both stay on hold, because Martin, my producer, wants to get some information from you.
Okay.
Thank you both. Ricky Don White says his father killed JFK, and Robert Groden. Stay with us for a local news update, ABC News at the top of the hour, then open phones next hour on San Diego's news station, AM 1130, KSDO.